Pasuk Dalid, Parshas Lech Lecho. Vayilech Avram kashidiber Elov Hashem. Vayilech itolot. And Avram went as God had spoken to him. Vayilech itolot. And Lot had gone with him. And although Hashem says you should separate from your father's household, the base of Vichor, nevertheless, we find Lot tagged along. And the Racham HaKodesh points out, he should have rejected him. He shouldn't have allowed it. But nevertheless, Avram did allow it. He didn't in any way push him away. Avram ben Chomei Shonim v'Shivim Shonim b'Tzeis Michoron. And Avram was 75 years old and left Choron. When he left Choron to go to the land that Hashem will show him, he was 75 years old. The Balaturim points out, if he was 75 years old when he left Choron, we know that Avram lived until the age of 175. So when Hashem said, Lech Lecho, Lecho is 50, and Lech is 50, same word. So 50 and 50 is 100. What he was saying to him, when you go there, you'll live another 100 years. That's Lech Lecho. When you go to the land that I will show you, there you will live another 100 years, because he was 75 and his life was 175 years old. So it's interesting. Originally, when Hashem had said to Avram, it says, Vayomer Hashem el Avram. Vayomer is not as formal as Diber, correct? The Pasha begins, Vayomer Hashem el Avram, Lech Lecho. And here, the Torah tells us, and he had gone as God had spoken to him. We know speaking, Dibur is formal, Amira is more informal. So seemingly, when Hashem had spoken to him, it was with not as a dictate, but as making almost like a suggestion. Vayomer, relatively speaking. But it says, and he had gone as God had spoken to him, as a dictate. We'll see in a moment. So the Balaturim doesn't address this question, but he explains why does it say V'yomer Hashem el Avram Lech Lecho, that since this was one of the 10 tests, Lech Lecho, it's alluding that just as we say that Basar Maimoros Nivra Olam, the world was created through the 10 utterances of Hashem, the world was created in the schus of Avraham Avinu. Vayomer is alluding to the Asar Maimoros, to the 10 utterances. Therefore, the Torah does not begin Vayedaber Hashem el Avram Lech Lecho, Vayomer, to indicate the significance and the value of Avram, that Avram himself is the objective of creation, because he will address the objective of creation, ultimately being the founding father of the Jewish people who will accept the Torah at Sinai. Therefore, the Parsha begins with V'yomer. So it's not difficult. So factually, it's Diber. Avram took it as a dictate, but it only used the term Vayomer because it's alluding that the world was created in the schus of Avram Avinu. That I would answer with the Balaturim. We'll see in a moment. The Midrash tells us that the moment Hashem had told Avram to leave, very often a person has to put his personal affairs in order, and then he goes. Literally, the moment Avram was told go, at that moment he picked himself from left. It's not even, you wouldn't even call it a delay. It's not that he delayed. A person has to address certain things before he leaves. Avram took it as a dictate. It was a direct command to go. Therefore, your personal issues are not issues any longer. You must leave immediately. Therefore, it uses the term, tells us how he internalized the communication between Hashem and himself. It's kasher diber. Elov Hashem. Vayelech itolot. V'ikach Avram et Sarai ishto. He took Sarai, his wife, Ves Lot ben Ochiv, Lot, the son of his brother. Interesting. We're identifying Lot as Ben Ochiv. When it says, when the Torah tells us that Avram had gone as God had spoken, and Vayelach ito Lot, and Lot went with him. It doesn't say Vayelach ito Lot Ben Ochiv. Doesn't say that. But when it says when Avram took, who did he take? He took Sarai, his wife, and Lot Ben Ochiv. Lot, the son of his brother. Now he's being identified. I mean, we could have identified him just a pasuk earlier. Vayelach ito Lot Ben Ochiv. If we want to identify who Lot is, let's say he's Ben Ochiv. So why do we only identify Lot as the son of his brother when the Torah tells us he took him? That's called Rechushem Asher Rechoshu, and all of his possessions that he amassed. That's Hanefshe also B'choron. And all the converts that he made in Choron, the people who he had converted to monotheism. And he embarked to go to the land of Canaan, and he arrived in the land of Canaan. So let's get back to that question. In Pasuk Dalid, when it mentions Lot going with Avram, doesn't say Lot ben Ochiv. When the Torah tells us he took him, there it does identify him as ben Ochiv. Why? That's the question. We had mentioned that we find that Avram was dedicated to Lot at a level which is not understandable. When they parted their ways, as we read a little bit later in the Parsha, because Avram himself could not tolerate the level of behavior of Lot and his shepherds. They were stealing grazing lands. And even when Lot parted, it says, Vayisov Mikedem. He traveled Mikedem. So Rashi over there cites the Midrash, when he separates from Avram, it says, he traveled Mikadmot Shalom. He says, I'm not interested in Avram, I'm not interested in his God. I have no interest in anything that he represents. So Lot is basically a bad guy. But yet, when he separates, he says, I'm there for you. Whatever happens, I'm there for you. And ultimately, he was taken captive. And Avram went to battle to save his life, to save him, or his possessions, and much more than that. And now, how does one individual defeat four kings, four mightiest kings of the world? He had to resort to enormous miracles. You don't merit a miracle unless you have a schus. So Avram believed that after he had saved Lot, and he had to rely on his merits, maybe he depleted all his merits, and he didn't have much left. Hashem says to Avram, Al tira Avram, you have nothing to worry about, Avram. Your reward is enormous. You don't have to worry that anything was depleted. Not only don't you have left, so you even have more. But firstly, if he knew that this would be the cost factor, what are you worried? Person goes, you have to purchase something because it's a necessity. So why worry? You know in advance what it's going to cost. You made a pact with your brother, with your nephew. And in addition, if this is the cost factor, for such a person who has no interest in God, who chooses the location to move to, where the people are evil, and he himself had displayed evil behavior, why is Avram putting his spiritual life on the line for him? Why? Right? We asked that question. So we had answered regarding that question, who was the first human being in the history of existence to give his life to sanctify Hashem's name? Although that was not his interest. That was not his intent initially. Haran, the father of Lot. The whole story with the Kasdim. Nimrod, after Avram had come out of the kiln, Haran had said, before Avram went to the kiln, I'm going to wait and see whether there's a God or no God. If Avram comes out of the kiln, I will not bow to the idol. I will go into the kiln. If he doesn't come out of the kiln, then I will bow to the idol. Avram comes out. Haran goes into the kiln. He does not come out. The only reason why Haran went into the kiln was because he believed he was coming out of the kiln. Avram, when he went into the kiln, he went in to give his life. He had no idea that God would perform the miracle. Haran only went in because he believed that God of Avram will save him also. But factually, he perished. Didn't come out. But factually, why did Haran die? He died al Kiddush Hashem. He died because he was not bowed to the idol. That public event that this human being gave his life to sanctify Hashem's life, Avram felt he had a debt of gratitude to his brother that he must assume all levels of responsibility for his son, because now he's orphaned. That's why Avram committed himself at this level to Lot. So let's understand. Vayelech ito Lot. Hashem says, Avram, when you leave your homeland, your birthplace, your family. Lot imposed himself on Avram. Vayelech ito Lot. He went. But the question is, even though he went, Lot wants to go. But why did Avram agree to take him? Vayikach, Avram is Lot ben Ochiv. You know why he agreed to take him? Because he was ben Ochiv. Because he was the son of his brother. And he had this level of indebtedness to his brother because his brother represented Kiddush Hashem. That's why he took Lot, because he was ben Ochiv. That's the reason. That's why when it speaks about Lot going, Lot went with him. You may want to come, but why would Avram be agreeable to take you? The answer is because he's Ben Ochiv, because he's the son of Haran, who was offered his life to Kiddush Hashem. Therefore, he had this debt of gratitude, and he wasn't going to push him away. But we'll see later, the first opportunity that he had to part their ways, he took advantage of that. When they couldn't get along, he says, okay, now it's time to separate. And Lot was more than happy to separate. But as long as Lot wasn't agreeable to separate, Avram was not going to push him away. That's the question.
When you mentioned that when the world was created, it was the utterances were more of an informal characterization, and it alludes to that with.
I didn't say the utterances were informal. Your question is, if the utterances brought about existence, so why does it say Vayomer? It say Vayidaber Hashem, not Vayomer Hashem.
Yes.
So it said by Avram, it only says Vayomer to allude that he is the purpose of those original utterances. So you're asking, but if the world initially, especially, was created with the attribute of justice, which is the ultimate and formal, it should say Vayidaber in every one of the days of creation. That's your question. So what I would answer is this. The question is, which is a very basic, a very important question, which has to be addressed, which is addressed by David HaMelech in Tehillim. If God is perfect on the absolute level, and God needs nothing, God has no needs. Need means you're deficient. So why did God create the world? What was the impetus to create a world? So David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Olam Chesed Yiboneh. The world was created purely out of Chesed. That man should be beneficiaries of the opportunity that if they make a choice, which is a correct choice, and it's due to their own initiative, they will merit the ultimate. So pre-creation, God owed nothing to anyone. But because the Ramchal explains God is the essence of good on the absolute level, good does good. So therefore, he offered this opportunity for man to achieve something which is unparalleled at any level. So therefore, it's dibur. It's very exacting and it's the attribute of justice. But to indicate the chesed aspect, what was the impetus? Why? It's Vayomer. It's like you have a homeless guy in the street and you go over to him and say, by the way, how are you doing? Do you need anything? I'm willing to help you. You have no reason to go over. Why are you going over to him? You have no relationship with him. The answer is that's chesed. So to indicate the chesed aspect of the cause, why it factually it was exacting. But what was the impetus for that? It was Vayomer.